tomorrow. Congressman, great to have you here.
Good morning, Allison.
How did that letter that arrived from the Department of Justice last night change everything for tomorrow?
Well, I don't think it changes anything for tomorrow. I mean, one of the challenges here has been, if you watch Mueller's testimony to Congress, historically, he is a man of very, very few words. And so, of course, one of the challenges that we have will be to sort of give him the questions that bring the report to life. Look, the letter is not rooted in any law. It's not rooted in anything. Mueller can pretty much say anything he wants, other than obviously disclosing classified information. So I don't think the letter means a lot. What means a lot is the fact that Mueller has said, and Mueller is a guy who says what he means and means what he says that he's staying inside the four corners of the report.
So he's no longer a Department of Justice employee, so he doesn't really have to comply, you're saying, with the letter.
No, that's exactly right. And I mean, you know, this is a long tradition of this particular White House, is sort of making up privileges out of whole cloth. I mean, the notion that somehow an investigation of the president and the president's people is subject to executive privilege or any other privilege is absurd. By the way, Mueller is talking to Congress. Congress doesn't need to recognize any privileges other than the Fifth Amendment constitutional privilege. So the letter is meaningless. What is more of a challenge is, you know, whether Mueller is going to do anything other than stick to the words of the report.
Right. His own self-imposed boundaries are going to be a big challenge for you because, let's be honest, you want him to stray from the report. You have questions that the report didn't answer.
Yeah, that's right. And I think we're talking a lot about, you know, hopefully Mueller saying the report. That's information being conveyed to the American people who, by and large, have not read the report. Secondarily, he's got some questions to answer. For the first time ever in the investigation of a president, he not to interview that president. Anybody who's been in or around or is a prosecutor would know that you always interview people to try to determine what they were thinking. And then most interestingly, and I think here's the challenge with Mueller, the report, when you read it, is a series of historical events. George Papadopoulos, on to Dimitri Simes, on to Carter Page. People don't absorb information that way. They absorb a narrative thread. And the narrative thread in this report, even if it isn't obvious, is that the Russians, in dozens of ways, reached out to the Trump campaign to help. The Trump campaign welcomed that Russian help, most notably with Don Jr. saying, if this is what I think it is, I love it. And then they used that help. Now, that didn't rise, apparently, to the level of a criminal conspiracy. But the Russians offered, the Trump campaign said, bring it on. And then they used the information that came through WikiLeaks in their campaign. The American people need to understand that, if for no other reason, to make sure it never happens again.
Here's how it's going to look tomorrow. From 8:30 to 11:30 a.m., the House Judiciary Committee will get their chance to interview him, and they will focus on obstruction, as we understand. Then your committee from noon to 2 p.m., the House Intel Committee, and you all will focus on Russian interference. So in your precious few minutes with him, what's your most burning question you're going to ask him?
Yeah, I think generally my committee is going to focus on episodes in Volume 1, which, as you point out, is about the Russian attack on the election and the Trump campaign's welcoming of that election. Each of us, I think, will take a portion of that report and try to bring it to life. I do think it's going to be different than the Judiciary hearing. You know, the Judiciary Committee is much larger. The Judiciary Committee on both sides have people like Jim Jordan, more activist, more aggressive people. I think you're going to find that the intelligence hearing is a little calmer because it will, again, be on largely on Russia.
What if every single answer he gives you is, I'd like to refer to my report, see my report?
Well, that's okay. I mean, for example, somebody like me, I could say, you know, Mueller, according to the report, you know, Don Trump Jr. said he loved the idea of receiving help from the Russians. Is that correct, Mr. Mueller? And he, of course, would have to say yes. So, no, I don't imagine that he's going to do a dramatic reading. But I do think it's, you know, again, there's one of my colleagues said it best. There's a difference between reading the book and seeing the movie. And part of the objective here is that Bob Mueller bring this thing to life. And it's important for reasons far beyond what you think of Donald Trump. It's important because Americans need to understand how they were manipulated on social media. We need to understand how network vulnerabilities can lead a country to damage our democracy. And enough Americans sort of haven't learned the lesson that is in Volume 1. So I think whatever you think of the politics, there's some real lessons in what happens tomorrow.
Have you seen this memo from Nancy Pelosi? It is literally hot off the presses. It's hot in my hands. It just came out, and it is her guidance for House Democrats like yourself of how you are supposed to talk about this before the hearings and after. Have you seen this?
I haven't seen that yet. I've heard about it.
Take a little gander at this, since this is her recommendation to you. And I think what she's trying to tell you is that everybody has to be on the same page before and after this about what you hope to get out, or what comes out of this, because you all don't see this as the end. Whatever happens tomorrow, you don't see this as the end. So what are the next plans for where you all move after what Mueller says?
Well, so I haven't read this document here, but again, I think the big message to come out of this whole event, and let's stipulate that it wasn't criminal. We trust Mueller's judgment in that regard, although there's certainly some unanswered questions. The Russians offered a lot of help. The Trump campaign said, bring it on, and then they used that help. Look, you should form your own judgment about what you think that means about Donald Trump and his people. And you might even, if you're a Donald Trump supporter, say, what if it had been Barack Obama who had welcomed Russian help? How would you have responded to that? But look, we've got larger challenges, right? We've got continuing work to do on fully understanding the counterintelligence aspects of this report. To my way of thinking, I'm not satisfied that we've done enough to really understand exactly how the Russians did that. We've got work to do there. By the way, we've got work to do in this country, those of us who would like to see a different president, in making sure that we're balanced. I don't know that a whole lot of people are going to change their opinion of Donald Trump and the Trump administration tomorrow. So we've got to remember that we've got other messages and other things that we need to do, including addressing the anxieties of Americans at the kitchen table around health care, around educating their kids, around retirement. So we've got to run a careful balance between what it is that we do in the 18 months leading up to the election.
Well, Congressman Jim Himes, I know you're racing to catch a train to D.C. So are we. We're going to be in D.C. all of New Day. We'll be there tomorrow to cover all this, so we'll be watching closely.
Excellent.
Thanks so much for being here.